Since we're talking about foreshadowing, I might as well just keep sharing and how much I love foreshadowing and break it down. And one of the other types of foreshadowing that you're going to find out there, and I think this is more of a fantasy, epic style one, is what will come to pass. It's unchangeable. It's a classic foreshadowing that you see in hero's journey style storytelling. It's like a definitive, without a doubt, piece of information that cannot be changed, right? Your chosen one tropes often use a what will come to pass, your prophecy tropes, things like that. And it does build a sense of foreboding, a sense of anticipation. It kind of hooks the reader harder than some of the other types of foreshadowing. Like in Lord of the Rings, when Galadriel was like, even the smallest person can change the course of the future, you already know that the future depends on Frodo. So and even Sam, right? And at that moment, and it comes through dialogue, it comes through the narrative, it can be delivered in any way and means. They find a tablet, they find a prophecy painted on the wall. You see the Shannara Chronicles kind of use this style a little bit of, this is what's supposed to happen, and there's this level of foreboding because there's no turning back and it has to be fulfilled a certain way. But it builds anticipation, it builds anxiety in the readers very well. We know what has to happen, but we don't know how it's going to happen, right? And you leave it just on the cusp of where you have wiggle room to translate it when that time comes as a writer. But it hooks the reader. It builds anxiety, anticipation like no other type of foreshadowing. And it is probably the most common one for fantasy and heroes' journeys and things like that. So what books have you read that you feel have what will come to pass very, very, very locked in? I would have to say the Narnia Chronicles has a very good vibe of what will come to pass, right? Because they're like, oh, the four the two kings and two queens, Adam of Eve, are coming and they're going to take down, and the prophecy has spoken. And there's a lot of prophetic tropes in that Chronicles. And he utilizes that time and time again. And when we think we have fulfilled that first initial few prophecies, they recycle them in some very interesting ways. So now we're questioning what will come to pass. Was it talking about that earlier event, or is it talking about another event later? And then it builds that anxiety and that hook and that sense of foreboding all over again, by also utilizing another type of foreshadowing that I like. But we'll talk about that in a different TikTok. And that one is what could come to pass. Oh God, what is it called? What could come to pass, right? There's the difference. These are concrete scenarios, but like in a romance, you would want to cover your what could come to pass. What could come to pass is more along the lines of, all right, she's got 3 love interests, right? And this is not a wide choose. So I have to exhaust and tie up the ends of all these foreshadowed relationships that aren't going to be the winning one, right? It's great for exploring a limited choice path type plot, where you have possible ins and outs of things. It'll address and acknowledge different possibilities. You see this a lot in epic science fiction, actually, surprisingly, and romance. So those two, strangely enough, use similar foreshadowing. And that's, hey, they could go to the space station, they could do this, they could do that, right? And a romance is she could choose the jockey guy, the femi guy, or the guy from her childhood, right? Her childhood friend. But I think what I love about what could come to pass is it allows for characters to make the same mistake twice. and it opens up that door, and it almost feels like a pick your own adventure story, but it must come with closure. When you decide which path is the true path, it has to bring closure. A recent well, I guess a more modern movie and book that does use what could come to pass very well is P.S. I Love You.